There is something happening in your brain right now, at this very moment, that scientists cannot explain. They can explain your heartbeat, they can explain your breathing, they can explain the neurons firing as you process these words. But what happens to you, the part that feels like a witness behind your eyes, when the brain stops? For most of the last century, medicine had one answer. It ends. The brain goes dark, and so do you. But in 2023, a team at NYU published something in the medical journal Resuscitation that quietly shook that assumption to its foundation. What they found in the last moments of life is something nobody expected. Sam Parnia is not a spiritual man by training. He is a British critical care physician, an associate professor at NYU Langone, and the director of resuscitation research at one of the most rigorous medical institutions in the world. He spends his days in ICUs, surrounded by dying people, and his nights thinking about what happens when resuscitation fails. For over 20 years, he has been asking one question. A question most of his colleagues considered career suicide. What if consciousness does not stop when the heart does? Not as a philosophical position, not as a hope, as a measurable, testable, scientific hypothesis. His first major study, in 2014, was already controversial. Across 15 hospitals in the US and UK, he monitored cardiac arrest survivors and asked them one thing after recovery. Tell me anything you remember. What came back was not nothing. 46% of survivors had memories from the time their heart was not beating, memories that had no business existing, and 2% of them described something specific enough to verify. Details about what was happening in the room, what the doctors said, where the equipment was placed, at a moment when their brains should have been producing nothing at all. The medical establishment filed this under interesting anomaly, so Parnia built a bigger study. AWARE 2 began in 2017. 567 patients, 25 hospitals across the United States and United Kingdom, over 3 years. And this time, Parnia did not just ask survivors what they remembered. He measured their brains in real time. For 85 of those 567 patients, his team attached portable EEG monitors during active CPR, recording brainwave activity second by second as doctors tried to bring them back. What the EEG showed broke something in the accepted model of consciousness. In nearly 40% of the patients, brain activity returned to normal or near normal at points in the resuscitation, not before cardiac arrest, not after recovery, during CPR, with the heart stopped. And not just any brain activity. The EEG was picking up spikes in gamma, delta, theta, alpha, and beta waves, the frequencies associated with higher mental function, with conscious thought, with memory and perception. A heart that was not beating was somehow producing the signatures of an active, thinking mind. What the AWARE 2 survivors described was different from hallucination, a perception of separation from the body, an observation of events without pain or distress, and something harder to categorize, a meaningful evaluation of their own lives and relationships, a sense of review, of reckoning. Dr. Parnia called these recalled experiences of death, something that was actually happening. Now, around this same time, a completely separate team was working on the same question from a different direction. Dr. Jimo Borjigin is a neuroscientist at the University of Michigan. Her specialty is the chemistry of the brain at the border of life and death. And in May 2023, she published something in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that added a second layer to what Parnia's team had found. 4 patients, all unconscious, all having life support removed. Borjigin's team placed EEG monitors and watched what happened as they died. In 2 of the 4 patients, as their hearts stopped, something unexpected fired in the posterior cortex of the brain, a massive surge of gamma wave activity. Gamma waves are the fastest brainwave frequency, associated with the highest states of conscious awareness, with moments of insight, with the process that ties together sight, sound, memory, and feeling into one unified experience of being alive. But in these dying patients, the gamma surge was not just present, it was higher than anything recorded during normal waking consciousness. The posterior cortex, the exact region associated with visual processing, with dreaming, with what researchers call the hot zone of consciousness, lit up at the moment of death more brightly than it ever had in life. A surge of gamma activity higher than normal waking consciousness firing in the region most associated with conscious experience at the exact moment the heart stops. Pay attention to that, because what comes next is harder to explain away. Everything I have just told you, the AWARE study, the EEG spikes, the gamma surge, involves a brain that has tissue, a brain that is damaged, struggling, but physically present. The neurons are still there. The architecture is still there. Even if it is failing, there is still something to generate a signal from. But there is another phenomenon that does not give the brain activity explanation anywhere to stand. It is called terminal lucidity, and it is the most scientifically unsettling thing I have ever read about the human mind. The term was coined in 2009 by biologist Michael Naum and psychiatrist Bruce Grayson, but the phenomenon they named had been documented since antiquity, written about in medical literature as far back as 1887, when a physician named William Monk called it lightening up before death. A woman has had Alzheimer's disease for 9 years. Her brain, at autopsy, will be found to contain so much amyloid plaque that 60 to 70% of her cortical tissue is functionally destroyed. For the last 4 years, she has not recognized her husband or her children. She cannot say their names. The doctors have explained that the brain tissue that stored her memories of them no longer exists. Then the night before she dies, she sits up in bed and asks for her children by name. They come. She knows who they are. She talks to them about things that happened decades ago. She tells them she loves them. She asks about the grandchildren. She is, for 20 minutes, the person she was before the disease. And then she lapses back into unconsciousness, and she dies the next morning. The brain tissue that should have generated this experience was gone. Tell me where that consciousness was stored. This is not one case. A survey of 45 Canadian palliative care volunteers found that 33% of them had personally witnessed terminal lucidity in the past year alone. It has been documented in patients with brain tumors, with strokes, with meningitis, with schizophrenia. Cases where the brain tissue responsible for the recovered function was objectively, measurably destroyed. The scientific community does not have a consensus answer to that question. What it does have are hypotheses, and what those hypotheses have in common is that they all require a fundamental rethinking of what consciousness actually is. The oldest and most dominant model of mind in neuroscience is physicalism. Consciousness is what the brain does. When the brain stops, it is gone. Simple, clean, testable. The problem is that terminal lucidity, the aware data, and the gamma surge all point to consciousness occurring in situations where the physical brain cannot be producing it, which forces a question that mainstream neuroscience is deeply uncomfortable with. What if the brain does not produce consciousness? What if it receives it? There is a theory, discussed seriously by philosopher David Chalmers, neuroscientist Christoph Koch, and quantum physicist Roger Penrose, that consciousness is not generated by matter, but is instead a fundamental property of the universe, like mass or charge. And the brain is a kind of antenna tuning into it. When the hardware degrades, the signal does not disappear. It just cannot be expressed through that particular channel anymore. Pim van Lommel is a Dutch cardiologist who spent 13 years studying near-death experiences across 10 hospitals in the Netherlands. His study, published in 2001 in the Lancet, included 344 cardiac arrest survivors. 18% reported some degree of consciousness during clinical death. Van Lommel's conclusion was stated carefully but clearly: the current conventional model of mind-brain relationship needs revision. He wrote, "How could a clear consciousness outside one's body be experienced at the moment that the brain no longer functions during a period of clinical death?" The medical establishment did not have an answer. It still does not. Here is what I keep coming back to. The woman with Alzheimer's who recognized her children. The cardiac arrest patient who could describe what the doctor said while he had no heartbeat. The gamma surge firing hotter than any living brain at the exact moment the dying one crossed over. None of these, individually, prove what most people would want them to prove. Science does not work that way. A single finding proves nothing. 100 findings open a question. But what they collectively suggest is something that has profound implications. Not just for neuroscience, not just for medicine, but for every person lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if this is all there is. There is growing scientific evidence, imperfect and contested and still incomplete, that consciousness is not simply the product of brain activity, that it can occur in the absence of the brain tissue normally required to produce it, that in the final moments of life, something appears to expand rather than contract. Dr. Parnia, who has made it his life's work, says this: "We are, right now, on the edge of understanding what happens when a person dies. Not spiritually, scientifically, with EEG monitors and peer-reviewed journals and reproducible methodology. He does not claim to know what comes next. He claims to know that the question is no longer unanswerable. So what do you do with this? The honest answer is, you do not have to do anything. You can file this away as interesting research and go on with your day. But if you let it in, even a little, it changes something. Because if consciousness is not simply brain activity, then who you are is not just the sum of your neurons. There is a version of you that exists in every moment, not as a brain-generating experience, but as something larger, something that uses the brain the way a musician uses an instrument. When the instrument breaks, the musician does not disappear. The research does not tell you what happens next. But what it says, in peer-reviewed language, with EEG data and 567 resuscitated patients, is that the current model is incomplete. That what serious scientists and major hospitals are finding, carefully and reluctantly, and with appropriate scientific hedging, is that something appears to survive. If that is true, even partially, then how you spend the time your instrument is working matters even more. Not because death is coming, but because what you are might be bigger than what dies.